Hello friends and welcome to a new series called React Hooks. In this series we are going to talk about one React hook per video, and I will do my best to keep my explanation simple and clear. So let's just start with useState. I have already created my React app using Vite, and I've deleted almost everything except the app component, in which I only have one h1 tag, as you can see on the screen. So the useState hook allows us to have reactive data. That means we can have data that would be updated on the fly. On the documentation we have this syntax that tells us how we can define our useState variables, but I'm just going to paste it as a comment. Before we actually do that, I'm going to console useState and see what we get. Make sure you import it from React and then use it in your component. And of course, it needs to be invoked. So let's save this one, and we get an array with two elements. The first one is undefined. The second one is a function that is empty. So we know useState returns an array with two elements, and we can save it inside our component and destructure that one. So the first element is going to be our state. We can call it whatever we want. I'm going to call it title. For example, this is a title for a post. And the second one is a function, as we can see down here, that is going to set our state or is going to mutate our state. And by convention, it starts with the word set. So I'm going to call it set title. So now we can use the hook, use state, and initialize it. So this use state takes the initial state or initial value for our state inside this parentheses as an argument. So this title, for example, could be an empty string or whatever we want to pass in here. It could be a number, it could be a boolean, objects, arrays, or things like that. So let's console that log, that title, and of course we should get high. So now let's output it on the screen and see how the reactivity works for us. So I'm going to output that title using the curly brackets, and of course we get high, and I'm gonna get rid of this console. So under that h1 tag, I'm going to create a button that says change, and the idea is when I click on this change button, this text should change to something else. So I can pass the onClick event to this button and just pass an anonymous function here using arrow function. And I want to call the set title function inside this anonymous function that would take as an argument the new value for our state. So whatever we pass inside this parentheses, it's going to be our new state. Let's say new post, for example. Now, if I click on this button, that text is being updated because it's reactive. And again, a reactive data is basically a live data that is constantly looking for changes, and it's being updated on the fly. Now, one of the most common use cases of useState is in forms and with input fields. Let's say I have an input field here, and when I type in here, I want to update this string or this text. So I can set the value for this input field to that title. As soon as I save this one, React gives me a warning and it says you are trying to change the value of an uncontrolled input. That means I'm not controlling it, I'm just outputting something inside this input field. And because the state is not being changed, I cannot type anything inside this input field. So what we want to do, we want to listen for an unchanged event on this input field, and again pass an anonymous function inside this one. I'm just going to put these on new line so it's cleaner and we can see easier what we are doing here. All right, so for the unchanged event, I'm going to pass an anonymous function, and we want to listen for the target value. So we need to accept the event as a parameter in our function and then pass it inside the set title function. And I want to say grab the target, which is this input field, and then set the value to the title, which is our state. So this title is constantly looking for changes. And as we type inside this input field, this is being updated. Therefore, this is being updated. Now, we are already have the output up here. So let's save it, give it a refresh. The error is gone. And if I type here, this text is being updated on the fly because of the reactivity. Now, like I said, you can pass anything inside this useState as your initial value. If you say an empty string, so we have nothing on the screen, but if we type, we can see it being updated, or a number or a boolean and things like that. But let's say you want to pass an object or an array. So when you are passing an array or an object, make sure you replace that object when you call your set state, or in this case, it's called set title. So if we go to React documentation for a moment and scroll down, and right about here, updating objects and arrays, it says React state is considered read-only. And that's why we couldn't change the value of our input field before we applied the unchanged event. Because it is read-only, we should replace our state rather than mutate it. Basically, if we have an object, we can't set a property directly like this. We need to return the object as it is, or our state, and then change whatever property we want to change. Let's see an example of this one. So I'm going to pass an object inside this useState, and for our title, I'm going to have an ID, set it to 1, and also a body, set it to post body. All right, so I'm going to comment this input out because it will give us a warning. I saved the document and that's why there is an error there. So for the title, we want to output title ID and also title body. All right, so if I save it and refresh, the errors are gone. All right, so far we know this is our initial state. We have the ID of 1 and the post body is this one. Now I want to change this ID to 2 when I click on this button. If down here, instead of this string, pass number 2, I'm basically just saying that my state is just 2. So if I click on this one, we get nothing because these two don't exist anymore. So our state is just the number 2. So if I console.log title, you can see we get 2. So what we need to do here, we need to pass an object and then set the ID to 2. This again is a problem because if I refresh and click change, now our state is an object with only one property. So we lost the body, and that's why React says you need to replace your state and not mutate it. So that means we need to use the spread operator and grab the state as it is and then change whatever property we want to change. Now if I save this one, give it a refresh, click on this change button, now we get our state as it was before, but we change the ID. Basically, this object is a new object. We completely destroyed that one and then returned a new one. Now this can be applied to the input field as well. So let's bring this input field back, and instead of the title for the value, I'm going to say this is going to be title body. So imagine this is post and this is the post body. For the unchange event, again, we can't pass just a value as text or a primitive value. We need to pass an object. So I'm going to cut this out and pass an object, and first spread the state, whatever that is, and then set the body to the value we get from the target, which is our input field. Let's give it a save and refresh. And if I type here, you can see we get it in the console as well as on the screen. So, all right, so that is the useState hook. And one last thing about the hooks in general, that you cannot use them inside if statement or loops. So if we go back to the documentation, go back up, and we have a caveat right here. It says useState is a hook, and hooks can only be called on the top level of your components. You cannot call them inside loops or conditions. So keep that in mind. You cannot use hooks inside conditionals or loops. And that is about useState. I hope this video has been helpful and you enjoyed it. And I want to thank you all for watching and all your support. See you at the next one. Bye bye.